right, welcome everybody to QB Power Hour. Today is June the 2nd, 2016, and the episode for today is Inventory Assemblies and Manufacturing Part 3. So we will be focusing on manufacturing features that you pretty much can only do in QuickBooks Premier, Accountant, or Enterprise. So if you're a QuickBooks Pro user or a QuickBooks Online user, none of the things that we're going to talk about today are going to work with those versions. So just make sure you keep that in mind. It's going to be QuickBooks Premier, Accountant, and mostly Enterprise. We're going to have strong focus on Enterprise because we haven't discussed the first two episodes, Enterprise features. We haven't discussed them in detail. So we're going to discuss those in detail. Now the slides, I put it down there in the chat box. I put a link to the slides. If the slides link is not working, and also a link to the previous episodes. All right, so again, as mentioned, this is part 3 of the manufacturing and assembly features. So the agenda for today, we'll talk about QB Power Hour briefly. We'll talk about the CPE process and the ACE process. We'll talk about some upcoming events that are web-based and live. And then the learning objectives for today, it's to learn how to work with QuickBooks Premier, Accountant, and Enterprise to do typical manufacturing processes for your clients. This is obviously important for accountants to have those learning objectives there for us to issue our CPE. So about QB Power Hour, we usually do the webinar twice a month, Thursdays, 12 p.m. Eastern. So if you're logged in live, this is the normal time frame that we do this at. The next two episodes coming in 2 weeks, we're going to have advanced tips and bank feeds. We're going to focus heavily on QuickBooks Online bank feeds and some really new, neat new features they've added recently to bank feeds. So we'll talk about some of the advanced topics in that. That's going to be an ACE course. That's our first ACE course. So for QuickBooks Pro, advanced QuickBooks Pro advisors that are going to have a requirement of so many hours, I forgot what the annual requirement is, hours per month in order to keep your Advanced Pro Advisor certification. You have to take so many ACE courses. Next episode in 2 weeks is going to be an ACE course. And then 2 weeks after, on June 30th, Michelle's going to do tricky QBO conversions, mostly in the areas of payroll, inventory, and sales tax. So QB Power Hour is typically all about tips and tricks and advanced insights of QuickBooks. Typically, we do 50% desktop, 50% online. Sometimes we alternate. Like, for example, this episode will be 100% desktop. Next week will be 100% QuickBooks Online, that sort of thing. And every once in a while, we'll have a special guest, third-party developer, to discuss practice management, maybe something related news, or a third-party app that connects with QuickBooks. That's going to be the case of June 14th. We're going to have Mark Wickersham talk about value pricing for QuickBooks Online clients. It's going to be an awesome episode in about a month. All right, so the CPE process, if you need your CPE because you're a CPA or a certified bookkeeper or something similar, you must attend the webinar live. So this webinar will be recorded and it will be posted in YouTube. However, you only get the CPE certificate if you attend live. Must be logged in for at least 50 minutes. We will give you a CPE password somewhere in the middle of the webinar. And then towards the end, we'll ask you a polling question. We usually takes about 3 weeks to mail our certificates. We're actually a little bit behind because Michelle and I, we've been traveling quite a bit. So we haven't issued CPE certificates for April 28th, May 12th, or May 17th yet. So yeah, don't email me anymore. I know a few of you have emailed me about getting your certificates. Give me another week or two and I'll issue all of them. There's just been a lot of travel between May and June. And QuickBooks Power Hour, QB Power Hour has been approved to issue into an ACE credit, but not all episodes are. So we will clearly mark the episodes that are. The next episode in 2 weeks will be an ACE credit episode. Michelle Long is not with us today. She's actually, I believe she's traveling. She's the co-host of QB Power Hour. Join her LinkedIn group, has over 160,000 members. Check her out on Amazon. She has 4 or 5 books, all on QuickBooks and accounting related topics. Myself, I'm Hector Garcia. I'm a CPA. I live and work in Miami, Florida. I teach QuickBooks in my own classroom. I'm a member of the Intuit Trainer Writer Network. I'm participating in the Intuit Council this year and next year. So I'm very excited about that, about the Intuit Accountant Council, and that's going to be traveling again in the summer. I'm an expert in all things QuickBooks, Excel, data import, and integrated apps. There's my email and a Twitter handle if you want to communicate with me directly. Now, other upcoming events I recommend. I have another webinar series called Enterprise.Expert, which is all about QuickBooks Enterprise topics. So if you're going to be heavily working with QuickBooks Enterprise only clients, that webinar is dedicated only for QuickBooks Enterprise, and we're still discussing advanced reporting. So in 2 weeks on Wednesday, same time as this, but on Wednesday, June 15th, we'll be talking about commission reports. So we'll talk about building commission reports in QuickBooks Enterprise. That should be an awesome episode. If you are not certified in QuickBooks Online yet, or you need to renew your certification, and you're in any of these cities, Atlanta, Boston, Glendale, Jersey City, Long Beach, Miami, Portland, or Seattle, you can join the one-day event, QuickBooksTrainingEvents.com, for a QBO certification day. Teach you how to pass the exam, pass the exam the same day. So if you live in any of those cities or close to those cities and you need to get your QBO certification, or you need to update this year's QBO certification, join us. Okay, I will be in Atlanta and Miami. So if you come to those, obviously say hi. Let me know that you listen to this or watch these episodes at QB Power Hour. That would be nice to hear that we have people out there actually watching these things. The QuickBooks Virtual Conference is June 22nd and June 23. It's all web-based, QuickBooksVCon.com, mostly about QuickBooks Online and practice management and moving to the cloud and that sort of thing. And then we have the live event, QuickBooks Connect, October 24th and 26th at San Jose, California. This will be the third year that the QuickBooks event happens, and you can go to QBCon2016.com for that. All right. So let's jump right in. The topics that we're going to be covering today are going to be the basic assembly process, and this will sort of be a review of things we already covered on the first and second episode of the basic assembly process, so we'll discuss that. Then we'll talk about adding labor or other overhead expenses to the assembly process. So typically when you do an assembly, QuickBooks is mostly concerned about the components, right? The other inventory parts, the other raw materials that are part of the value of that item. However, in some cases, in some manufacturing processes, labor is a significant piece. You know, the actual person that assembles the process and the actual staff that puts together that is involved. It's not just machinery, it's staff too. So if you, in order to add those expenses, there's a little bit of a trick that we're going to show you how to do. That's going to be right after we talk about just the basic the basic inventory assembly process. Then we'll talk about features that are only on QuickBooks Enterprise. So for all of my manufacturing clients, I strongly recommend that they only work with QuickBooks Enterprise, most specifically because of this. I mean, there's other features as well, but because of these features, it's very important to work with QuickBooks Enterprise. So we'll talk about editing assemblies on the fly. We'll talk about printing the assembly worksheet itself, or customizing the build assembly template. We'll talk about building sub-assemblies, which is like an assembly within an assembly, which is very important for measuring work in process work. So we'll discuss that. We'll talk about the where use tool, which is when one particular component needs to be replaced with another component, and we have to go to all of our inventory assemblies and change that component swap and not have to do one by one. We'll talk about the shortage report, for pending builds and missing components, and then we'll talk about automating the sales price on the fly as the bill of materials costs changed based on a fixed markup or something like that. Again, if you look in the chat box, I pasted a link for the slides. Sometimes you try to download through GoToWebinar, there's issues. So you can just download the slides through to that link I put in the chat box. Okay, so write down the CPE keyword. We're giving the CPE keyword early today. That way I can just go along, not have to worry about breaks, because there's going to be a pretty long demonstration. So write down your CPE keyword is sun, S-U-N, sun. CPE keyword is sun. And again, if you need to download the handouts, just use the link instead. So use the link instead if the handouts are not downloading. Sometimes GoToWebinar gives issues with downloading links for the handouts for some reason. So check out the chat box and download the link from there. Okay, so the CPE keyword is son. Write it down. If you need your CPEs, you've got to get the answer right when we ask for the CPE question towards the end. Is son. All right. Okay, so let's jump to the demo now. So I'm going to swap over to QuickBooks Desktop here. Okay, and I have QuickBooks Enterprise open, and then so I'll start with basically the features that are available in QuickBooks Premier, right? So what I'm about to, although I'm looking at QuickBooks Enterprise right now, what I'll discuss, it's available in Premier, Accountant, and Enterprise. And then when I'm actually doing things that are only related to Enterprise, I'll point that out. Okay, so let me close all the windows first. And let's talk about the basic assembly process. Okay, so the basic assembly process is going to have two phases. One phase is to create the actual assembly item with all the bill of materials. And then the second one is to actually build it, to actually construct it, to actually tell QuickBooks, I'm no longer using these components. They're now part of another inventory assembly item. So I'm going to go into the list menu and item list. And then let me just maximize this so we can kind of just get an idea for the items that I have here now. So this is the sample file. This is sample wholesale and distributor sample file. So you can pull this up on your own if you want to. So we have a whole bunch of items here. And then let's just assume for a minute that these items are raw materials. And these raw materials are going to be part of assemblies. Okay, so whenever we look at for example in the balance sheet, I'm simply go to reports, company financial, and balance sheet, and I should be able to differentiate my raw materials from my finished goods. So right now, for example, my inventory asset account is just called inventory asset. I'm going to go ahead and rename that account to raw materials, and that way whenever I create my actual assemblies, we're going to put those under finished goods, and that's going to make tons of sense once we build everything and show you the balance sheet. So let me call this raw materials. Maybe you also want to call it components. Okay, there could be several different ways to seeing it. So when I go look at my balance sheet, I see that I have $83,000 worth of raw materials or components. Okay, so that's kind of the first step. Make sure that all your inventory items are raw materials or components, and then the account that we're putting them on it's correct. Okay, now let's say for example that we have another inventory part that we don't have here, which are boxes. So we're going to take a box, just a blank brown box, and then we're going to assemble, where we're going to put several components inside of a box, and that in itself is going to be a component of a major assembly. So that's going to be, we're going to call that work in process. So I'm going to create a new item here, and then I'll do an inventory part, and then we'll call this, we'll just call it box. And then we'll just call it here, box to fit 8 bulbs. Okay, so basically we're gonna have a box that fits 8 bulbs, and then we're gonna, this is just a raw box, but we're gonna assemble it. It's gonna be the box and the bulbs together. Okay, so that should be pretty simple. So let's say each box cost me $1.75, and I don't sell it because these boxes, I don't sell them by themselves. They're gonna be part of a component. So usually what I end up doing is, whenever I run into a situation where I'm creating inventory parts of components that I don't sell, in the sales information, I put here, do not sell. That way, the person using QuickBooks is not tempted to actually sell this raw material because we're not in that business. And whereas the sales price, I'll just put here 0. Okay. Under income account, I have to put an income account no matter what, although I'm never going to really use this, but because I'm putting here, do not sell, to make sure that I run into that situation. Now, the minimum reorder point, really important. This is how many minimum number of boxes we need to have in order for QuickBooks to trigger letting me know that I have to order some more. So let's say that anytime I have under 1,000 boxes, I want to reorder and restock, and the maximum amount and the amount that I want to restock all the way to is 5,000. So we'll discuss the usability of these two things a little bit later on, and why these two things are important. But it's important for you to know that I want to have never no less than 1,000. If I run under 1,000, I want to stock up all the way to 5,000. I'm gonna put here box depot. I'll just create a vendor here for the boxes I'm gonna buy. Okay, so that's my box. Now this is also going to be under my raw materials components category, because these are still inventory parts that are considered raw materials. So we'll hit OK. So let's create the first assembly. So I'm going to click here under item and new. You could also just right click anywhere on the screen and click new. I mean, either one works. And then I'm going to pick inventory assembly. Now, inventory assembly is the type of item that we use in order to take raw materials, raw components, and assemble them into, in some cases, a finished good, and in some cases, a work in process. A work in process would be like an assembly within an assembly, and that stuff is also kind of common. So in here, under item name, we're going to call it box with bulbs, and then I'll just put next to the name WIP. You don't have to do that, but I'll do it just so I can identify them pretty easily. And then down here where it says I purchase assembly item from a vendor, so only if I actually buy assembled boxes with bulbs from a vendor, I would pick that option. So since I don't do it, I'm going to leave that out. Here where it says description, I will put here also do not sell. So do not sell, right? Because again, we don't sell this assembled product. This is still going to be a component of another item. Now, I still need a revenue account, although I'm never going to use it, so I need to put that there. And then down here, where it says raw materials, this is where I'm going to create a new current asset account for work in process. I'm going to go to add new here, and then I'll put here work in process. You can call it WIP if you want to, just WIP, that's fine. Just pick whatever name, just make sure that you have raw materials and work in process as two different items. Now, notice that in here, I don't have a minimum reorder point, I have a minimum build point. So basically what a minimum build point is telling me, it's how many assembled build boxes with light bulbs do we want to have in order for us to do our regular manufacturing process. So let's say that I generally want to have at least 500 built, ready to assemble a box with bulbs, and then the maximum I want to build to the ones, ideally I want to have at least 1,000 completely build box with bulbs. Good to go. So that's, again, we'll discuss the value of these later on as we actually do the building and see those components. So now let's talk about the actual bill of materials. So this little tiny box you see here, that's the bill of materials. And a bill of materials is just a fancy word for components inside of an assembled item. So I can actually just look for my items that are going to be assembled here. So let's say, for example, that's going to have one box. So a fully assembled box with bulbs will have one box. So I'm going to put here quantity 1, right? And then that's also going to have, let's say, 8 light bulbs themselves. So we're going to go down here and look for our light bulbs. So we got our specialty bulbs here. And let's say this box contains, let's say it contains 8 halogen watt bulbs, whatever those items are. So I'll pick these, and then I'm going to put here 8. Okay, so basically this finished item here is going to be a box and 8 light bulbs. But again, we don't sell these. These are also going to be part of the larger box, which is going to contain a chandelier and this box with a light bulb. So this will give you the example of the working process or an assembly within an assembly of that component. Now, up here, this is really important. Here it says cost. And it says, well, what cost do you want to give it? Okay, so actually I can choose user-defined cost and then make up my own cost if I wanted to. Okay, now that could serve a purpose if you want to override the actual component cost from the bill of materials. However, for the most part, if you actually trust the cost of each component, you're going to see a total here that says total bill of materials right there. And you actually want that number to transfer over. So in order to do that, I'm going to go into cost and click on total BOM cost. And then basically that 655 transfers over here, and then I don't have to actually calculate the cost. QuickBooks will calculate the cost of my component based on my entire bill of materials. And then we're going to add labor later on and discuss, what does it mean to add labor and overhead and that sort of thing. Now the sales price itself, I can override it. If I'm working with QuickBooks Premier, and if I want to work of a certain markup, then what I would do is I would just really transcribe 655, and then I put times. Let's say, for example, I wanted to add a 50% markup, I would do 1.5 and press tab, and that's going to give me a 50% markup. Now, this little information here that says markup 50% and margin 33%, that is not available in QuickBooks Premier or Accountant. That's only available in Enterprise. And how that's functional is I would click here on Edit Markup. Again, this is only QuickBooks Enterprise, and I would actually say, look, the markup I want to have is 75%, and then I hit Tab, and QuickBooks will calculate my sales price based on that. Or let's say, for example, I don't want to do it based on markup. Let's say I want to do it based on margin. Let's say I want at least 35% margin on these products. So I'll type there 35% and then hit Tab, and QuickBooks will then again calculate my sales price. So this is, again, only available in QuickBooks Enterprise, but this is very useful because down here where it says when assembly cost changes, it's asking you, hey, do you want my sales price to go up based on those margin requirements? That way, if the total BOM cost, right, this 655 here changes because maybe some of my assembly items or my bill of materials changes, do I want that sales price to be automatically changed? That's how functional this is. Very useful because in a manufacturing environment, the component costs vary greatly. Now, it's possible that you may be in a marketplace where the sales of the product is not really something you can change. You're very tied to maybe a market price, and then this stuff wouldn't be useful. But if you want to help the QuickBooks user protect their margins based on a particular margin level, that's what that will be useful for. Now, in this particular case, if you remember, let me go back for a second. This box with balls is something I'm never going to sell. So in this particular case, I'm going to override this to 0 because I'm never going to sell this. Remember, this is do not sell. So when we'll do our next level of assembly, we'll pay much more attention to that piece. Okay, so for the time being, this would be 0, and I'm not going to update based on any margin or markup because, again, I am not selling these products. Now, I like this a lot, that you can actually, if you want to edit any of these things, like for example, let's say the box is actually $1.80, I can actually click here where it says Edit Item. It opens this up, and then I can change this to 1.8, just like that, and then hit OK, and then my cost component will go up. So in many situations, we have to make sure that we're changing the cost of our raw materials consistently in order for them to really reflect maybe our average cost or a FIFO cost or a LIFO cost, whatever it is. So now the curious thing is QuickBooks takes the value that's actually up here, not the value that's up here when calculating your total bill of material cost. So that's kind of the curious part about it, that when it's actually calculating bill of material cost, it's not using average cost, it's not using LIFO, it's not using FIFO, it's using whatever the dollar amount we put up here. So I'm changing this to 1.9, hit OK, and then you can see right there that in my bill of material cost, that's being updated. That's why it's very useful to have that edit item button right there. I really wish the edit item button existed in sales transactions, but that's a whole nother story. Now, if I have bigger components that fit, that doesn't fit in this 3-lane, 4-lane kind of configuration, 3-line configuration, I can click here where it says Full View right there, and I would have a much bigger screen for me to add more components to it. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit OK. We'll hit OK, and then we'll hit No there. Okay, so now we have, I'm just going to expand this here. Now we have one inventory assembly, which is a box with balls work in process. Now, real quick, an area of confusion that happens quite a bit is people will create an assembly item, and then they go to the balance sheet and say, hey, wait a second, where's my transfer of value from raw materials into work in process? Well, we have not built the assembly yet, right? We just created the assembly item telling QuickBooks what are you going to take from when we go ahead and actually create the assembly. So it's a really important process. So let's go ahead and build the assembly. And by the way, I know I have not bought the boxes or received the boxes yet. So I kind of want to show you what happens when you sort of have an incomplete process there. So I'm going to go to the inventory menu and go to build assemblies. Okay, and then I'll pick my only assembly item that's here, which is a work in process. And then down here, really, really small, in sort of gray letters, it says maximum number of uh, of um, items I can build based on my quantity on hand, right? It's right here, okay? Now it's really, really small, it's hard to read, but that tells you right there that I don't have enough components or enough inventory on at least one of the items that is causing that issue, okay? And here, the issue is, it's right here. If you look at, let me just give me a second, get my cursor back. If you look at box quantity on hand is 0, that's causing the issue. And if you look at my bulbs, quantity on hand is 304. So I could assemble based on the items that I have on my of my bulbs, but not in my boxes. So in that case, let me go ahead and receive some of those boxes. So I'm going to go to enter bills, and then I'm going to go ahead and order some of these boxes. Okay, I'm going to go to, I think it's Box Depot, right? And then I'll pick my box item. And then let's say I'm going to order, let's say 2,000 of them. Okay, so this would be just a regular way I would order boxes, PO, receive a bill. But one thing I like to do right before hitting save and close is, we talked earlier, let me hit Control L here and Control E to edit this. So we talked earlier about this reorder points. Okay, how are these reorder points useful? Because when I was actually doing a PO or receiving a bill, notice that there was no information there about how much I should be ordering. So before I typically order components, what I do is I go into reports, inventory, and then I do inventory stock status by item. Okay, and then we're gonna look at here. We see here a box, right? We see right there, box, and then there's my reorder point. So there's the information. And notice that over here where it says order, there's a little checkbox that says order. That's basically telling you that you need to order because you have less than your minimum reorder point. But what's really neat about this is, and this is a QuickBooks Enterprise only feature. So far you can see this in QuickBooks Premier or Accountant just fine. However, this little box here that says auto create POs, that's a QuickBooks Enterprise only feature. And let me just click on that again. So right there where it says auto create POs, again, QuickBooks Enterprise only feature. And when I click on that, basically QuickBooks tells me, okay, I looked at every one of your components, I looked at every one of your stock, I looked at everything that you should possibly order to get you back into those minimum levels. Okay, so I can actually choose which components I want to order. If I actually click select all here, QuickBooks will create a purchase order for all of those items and get me back into my maximum reorder points. But let me just clear all for a second, because I'm kind of only focused on the boxes for now. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that box right there. Okay, so I'm going to click on that checkbox, and I'm going to see that QuickBooks is asking me to get me back to 5,000. So right here where it says create POs, and this little checkbox that says show purchase order after saving, will actually create a PO and then show me a report of all the purchase orders that are going to be created, if it's more than one, or it'll just give me the one purchase order that was created, so I can review it and email it or fax it to the vendor, or however it is that I actually do my orders. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create PO down here, and I'll click on that. So QuickBooks will create the PO for me. It didn't send it to the vendor or anything. You still have to email it or fax it or call the vendor and confirm the order, all that stuff. I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. And then QuickBooks automatically created the purchase order for me. So remember, when we were receiving some of the boxes, I went straight to bill. I really didn't know how much I was supposed to order. That's the really useful part of using the auto create POs, which is only available in in QuickBooks Enterprise to be able to guide you to the process of creating those POs. So at that point, then maybe I can now create my bill. So I'm going to go to enter bill. I'll go to my vendor that I order the boxes from. Then the PO is already created. Hopefully you emailed it or send it to your vendor. I'll hit yes. I'll pick my PO that was automatically created. I'll hit OK, and then my 5,000 boxes came in. Now I need to be able to have that inventory in stock for me to be able to assemble. Otherwise, I'm going to get that error message that I showed you earlier that said you have 0 available to build. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close. And now I'm going to go ahead and do my build. Now, real quick, while we're in the inventory stock status by item report, if I scroll all the way down here and you see my assembly items, notice that based on my pre-planning, I want to have at least 500 of these built. Now, I may not have enough stock to do so, but we'll talk about this shortly because I may be short on bulbs or something like that, but we'll discuss that in a minute. So what I essentially will love to build, or what I want to build, it's at least 500 of them, right? I mean, or at least 500 or a maximum of 1,000. So that's what that order checkmark means. In this case, in the context of assembly, it's not really asking you to order. In this case, it's asking you to build. And now there's no out to build button. That would be nice. That would be something that that kind of marries to the auto PO feature. There's no auto build function to get you back into the builds. That has to be a manual process. But I mean, it is where I think Intuit may be going in terms of new features in the future. We'll see, hopefully. Okay, anyway, so again, let me just do this again. I'm going to go to the inventory menu and click on build assemblies. Sometimes it's under the vendor menu, depending on which edition of QuickBooks you have. I'm going to go to build assemblies. Then here where it says assembly item, I'll pick my one assembly item. Again, that's my work in process assembly item. Okay, now I get to see that I have 5,000 boxes in stock and 304 light bulbs in stock. Down here, QuickBooks will do the calculation for me and say, well, based on all your components, the maximum number of assembled boxes you can build is 38. So that's my limit. I can only do 38 at this point. If I actually wanted to build 500 as intended, okay, and I hit tab, QuickBooks will give me this warning saying, hey, by the way, you really can't move forward. Now, you can make it pending, and then once you have the items, you mark it on pending and that sort of thing. But the problem that you have, especially with QuickBooks Premier and Accountant, is you don't have this little option here called Show Shortage. This is new. They added this, I believe, in, let me escape that again. I'm going to click it again, put the 500 here, and then hit Tab. Okay, so there's the 500. Okay, so I'll put the 500, hit tab, and then where it says shortage, I'll click on show shortage, and then I get a report. Now, what is this report telling me? This report is saying, we have 304 on hand for this. You actually are going to need 4,000 to be able to build the 500 you want to build. Therefore, you would have to reorder an additional 3,696 in order to get you back into whatever you want to build. So at that point, I can say, okay, fine, let's just go ahead and mark this as pending. Okay, so we can mark this as pending. So I'm going to go ahead and go to build and close and mark this as pending. So I'm not going to assemble my 500 units yet because I just don't have enough light bulbs, right? And then I'll go back into my inventory stock status report. You can see it's kind of interesting. Inventory stock status report. And then we're going to go down here, and then we get to see right here where it says full assemblies. You see that little checkbox. If I click on full assemblies, it will recalculate my availability based on doing the full assemblies. But let me get out of here for a second. There's a different report I want to show you because I started off on the wrong foot. If you go to assembly shortage by item, this is actually a much better report to use. Assembly shortage by item. This report will show me everything that I'm short by. Let me see. It's kind of curious. Give me 1 second. Let me go to my shortage report. Okay, oh, sorry, I went the wrong route. So I'm going to click on shortage reports. I apologize for that. I'm going to go to shortage report, and then on this report, it tells me that I'm short at 3,996, and there it was. I was looking for this little button here. I forgot where it was. So up here it says auto create POs. So what you can do from the shortage report, again, only available in Enterprise, is you can create the purchase order just to get you up to that minimum stock level that I need in order for me to assemble the 500 boxes I wanted to assemble in the first place. So at that point, I can hit create POs, and again, the PO gets created automatically. And if I were to then receive the inventory, and I'll put here, I forgot what the vendor's name was. This was Peacock. So I'll put here Peacock. I'll hit yes, and I'll pick that PO I just created in order for me to get the items that I need. Again, I would have ordered this amount and I would have received this amount. Now that I receive that raw component, I can close this, I can close this, and now if you go back and see this, now I have no issues building my 500. You actually see there that I have no issues building my 500. So that's one of the really interesting ways I can work with QuickBooks Enterprise and the auto create PO feature to get me all the work that I need in order for me to order the products that I need to create an assembly. So then at that point, I can click on receive, remove pending status right there on the bottom right. Okay, so I can click on, let me see, I can click on remove pending status on the bottom right, and at that point, my purchase order will just become. Let me just see. Let me select that. Give me 1 second. My cursor goes away sometimes. So there's my remove pending status. You should be able to see that. When I click that, you see that now it goes away. It's no longer showing as a pending build. And then when I click save and close, that build will actually happen. So what's going to happen is absolutely all my light bulbs will now go away, right? Because I will use them all. And then all of my boxes, not all my boxes, but 500 of my boxes will now be used. So I'm going to hit save and close. Then I go back into my item list. I'll maximize this. I look at my boxes. I got 4,500 boxes left. Let me scroll down and look at my light bulbs. And then I have 0 halogen lights left. So that gives you an idea more or less of how that worked. And then when I go into my balance sheet, I should now see a shift of inventory balance from my raw materials now into my work in process. So that was a dollar amount that was shifted from raw materials to work in process. Okay. All right. So that's the first step. And that's because boxes with bulbs is not a final product. It's an assembled product that goes inside of another assembled product. Okay. Now let me create a new inventory a new inventory assembly part. So I'm going to go to new, and then I'll create a new inventory assembly, and we'll call this one chandelier. If I knew how to spell chandelier. And I'll just put FG at the end just to let me know it's a finished good. You don't have to do that. That's just my internal piece here. And then here under the bill of materials, I'm just going to click on full view. I find this to be much more comfortable to work with. And then I'm going to pick the multiple items that go inside of my finished chandelier product. So let's say, for example, that it comes with some wire. So I'll pick wire here. And it comes with, let's say, 12 feet of wire. And this particular item is set up as an inventory part with multiple units of measure. In this case, it's set up as foot. So I'm going to put here 12 feet of wire, and then I'll put one of my inventory components, which is the actual chandelier itself. So we'll pick this one here, the tapestry with faux, whatever that is. So we'll pick that item there, and they say that only comes with one, so one major chandelier. And then part of the package, it's also going to be not the box, the raw box, but the assembled box. So let me go down to my box with balls, and then I'll click on that, and that comes with one. Okay, so right now my total cost of my assembly is $56.65 based on the cost from the assembled work in process item, the inventory component cost of the chandelier itself, and then the inventory component cost of the electrical wire. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Same thing here. So down here where it says bill of material cost, $56.65, that's going to be transferred over to this side. Okay, that says $56.65, unless I actually, so this is at $56.65. So that's unless I actually change this to user defined cost and pick my own cost. But again, I like using this because I want my cost to come from my bill of materials. That way I'm sort of monitoring my bill of materials for that purpose. Now down here under asset account, this is neither raw materials nor work in process. So this is going to be its own account called finished goods. We'll create our finished good product here. Okay, let's say our build point, let's say we usually want to have about 50 of these minimum and then 100 in stock. These are my actual products that I sell. So this is the stuff that I actually sell. So here I can put, finished chandelier with all components. Whoops. Okay, and then the income account, I'll pick my income account, and then going back into that feature that's only on QuickBooks Enterprise, that little button there that says edit markup, I'll click on that, and then I'll say, look, my costs are $56.65 because that's what was defined by my BOM cost, and I want to have at least, let's say, 80% margin on that, so I hit tab. So this tells me what my total sales price is going to be. Now down here where it says always update my sales price, or always or never update my sales price. This is if I want my sales price to change every time I change my component cost. So this stuff is going to come in handy once my component costs start changing, which we'll talk about when we'll talk about adding the labor component to it. Okay, so let me hit OK to that, and then I'll hit OK as well. I'll hit close, and then I'm going to go ahead and build that again, because if I go to my balance sheet, I will see my raw materials, my work in process, but I don't see my finished goods because again, we haven't completed that assembly. So let me go into inventory, build assembly. Now I have two choices. I got my work in process item, and then I have my chandelier item, right? So I got my chandelier item, and then based on my quantity in stock here, I can see down here where it says maximum number you can build. It's 41.66. Again, I can't really build 0.66 chandelier, so the maximum I can do technically it's 41. So I'll put 41 here. That is going to tell me exactly how much quantity is going to be needed for each one. Now, by the way, what you see on this screen here, where I can actually add a component, or change the quantities on the fly, this is only available in QuickBooks Enterprise. QuickBooks QuickBooks Premier or Accountant will have these screens locked. So whatever is originally set up in the item and the components, I can't change them on the fly. So this is a really nice component here that I can change them on the fly. For example, I want to say, look, from this point forward, I'm going to include maybe 2 boxes with bulbs. I can actually just come in here and put 2, and notice that it was just me switching it, and then my assemble product is going to be assembled with different components. So I'm not stuck to my original bill of materials. With QuickBooks Enterprise, I could change some of these components on the fly, even if I wanted to. With QuickBooks Premier or Accountant, you would have to go back to the assembly, change these boxes to 2, and then come back and rebuild again. So once I click on build and close, now we can see that we have finished goods, we have work in process, and then we have raw materials. Okay, so that's pretty much the concept. There's a couple of interesting tips and tricks here. For example, let's go into my item list, and we'll talk about adding labor to this. Okay, so let me just, for some context, let me go into my profit and loss real quick, and I'm gonna hit collapse here, and then I'll do this fiscal year to date, and then we'll go back and we see our wages. So just to simplify our process here, you see right there where it says wages office staff. Again, that may be confusing because it has the word office staff in it, but let's assume for a minute that's also warehouse people or assembly manufacturing people. Let's say that some of that labor cost, I wanted to move it and make it part of the assembly process. So in other words, the cost of my finished chandelier, let me go back into my finished chandelier, the cost of my finished chandelier is actually a lot more than 56.65 because I have a high skilled employee that spends, let's say, 20 minutes putting this thing together. So how would that work? And that's kind of a tricky piece. Let me hit cancel here. The way it works is I have to create a new item. Okay, I typically make it a service. won't explain why, but just typically make it a service. Other charge would work, but I typically make it a service. And then I'm gonna call this labor mark. Labor mark. And let's say I'm gonna put in here how much mark costs me, per hour. So I'm gonna click here where it says this service is used in an assembly or performed by subcontractor or partner. I'll click on that thing. And then here where it says cost, I'm gonna put Mark's hourly cost. I'm gonna put hourly, I'll put 15 just for internal information, plus, let's say I'm going to add 18% of overhead. So maybe that's taxes, a bunch of stuff. So I'll put here 15 times 1.18. So let's say my burden cost, including workers' comp, benefits, whatever, is 17.70. And that's actually what I want to add to the cost of my component. Here it says expense account, that's the tricky one. I have to pick this wages office staff because that's where I'm getting it from. But in order to just make it very clear, what I'll do is under wages, I'm going to create another account called allocated wages costs. Okay, so I'll create an account called allocated wages costs. So we're actually going to see it, instead of netting it, we're going to see it very clear in the expense category being netted out. Under sales price here, I could put 0, and I could put here, again, do not sell, right? Because this is not labor that we're selling. This is labor that we're calculating internally. Under income account, I'll put here revenue. Again, I will never use this, but I have to do it. Okay. And then here it says unit of measure set. That's a really important one. I'm going to create a new unit of measure set based on time. And you have to have this multiple units of measure set up. And this is really neat because sometimes we don't know based on hours, maybe we know based on minutes. So we can actually do it by the minute fraction, calculate a 17.70, which is a really nice flexibility area that we have there. So I hit next, and then let's say my base unit of measure is the hour because that's our hourly fee, 17.70, and I'll hit next, and then I'll create another unit of measure called minutes. So I'll do minutes and put here MIN, and then how many minutes, how many hours are there in a minute? So that would be 1 divided by 60. Okay, so that's 0.1667, whatever that is. Okay, so that's how many hours are there in a minute, and then I'll hit next. And you see this stuff will be really, really useful really soon once I actually add the labor components to it. Okay, so he cost me 17.70 per hour, including the overhead, and then I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So going back to my chandelier here, I'm going to go ahead and edit my chandelier inventory component. I'll click here where it says full view, and then I'll add on the third line labor mark, and notice he costs 17.70 an hour. If I know it's exactly half hour, how much time he's spending building this, I can just put 0.5. That could work. The other thing I can do is I can put, let's say it's not half hour, let's say it's 25 minutes. I could put 25 and then hit my unit of measure and put minutes. And sometimes this whole thing goes haywire. So I'll just put it again, put 25 minutes. And then this would actually calculate by the minute the cost of my employees. Again, if we have a pretty deep study about how much each employees take to build each of these assemblies, we can be really, really precise on the labor allocation. Now, you could do the same thing for allocating electricity, overhead, rent, if you wanted to. If you really wanted to do this heavy, cost accounting, managerial accounting type of work, typically labor is the one that most people are concerned with. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now notice I have a new component cost, which is 6403. Here where it says cost, I can actually change this to total BOM cost. And then again, when I go to edit markup, I want to make sure that 80% is my markup. That way my sales price gets automatically changed. So you notice sometimes when we think we are making what we're supposed to be making, and we add the labor component, we notice that the price needs to be a lot higher for us to reach that desired margin. Okay, so now we have 6403 as our actual materials cost. Let me go ahead and hit OK. And then I'm going to right click here and go to quick report, and I'm going to go ahead and delete that assembly, and I'm going to reassemble it, including the labor cost. That way we can see what our actual cost is. So we're going to go to delete build. Actually, before I do that, let me just go to balance sheet and show you my finished good is 2597. That's how much it was without the labor. Okay, so I'm going to go my build assembly. I'm going to go ahead and delete this assembly. Let me do it again. Chandelier. Now I have, I'm going to have labor in here. That's very clear. And then I'm going to build the same 41 units that are there. Okay, this tells me how much is taking from each component. I'm going to go ahead and hit save and close. So when I go to my balance sheet, I should see a different dollar value as part of my finished goods. See, so my finished good is a different dollar value. I don't remember exactly what it was, but I hope it's a different value at this point. I forgot somehow. The other piece here I just don't want to forget, because we're almost at the end of the hour, is a couple of extra features here. So for example, let's say that this indoor electrical wire became obsolete, and I no longer need to use this component. I now have to use my ground outdoor electrical wire in order to fit them in those components. So it would be really, really annoying for you to go, especially if you have a lot of components, to go into each one and see which ones have the electrical wire, and then come in here and change that to outdoor. Okay, that would be a lot of work. A lot of work for me to go in there and change, every single one of these to this, and then put here, what was it, 12 feet. Okay, that would be a lot of work for me to do this assembly by assembly. So QuickBooks Enterprise has a really neat feature where if you have one component that needs to replace another component altogether across every single bill of materials, okay, basically what we do is we right click on indoor electrical wire, and then we click on where used. Again, this is only QuickBooks Enterprise. We click where used, and then this will actually give me a list here of every single component, every single assembly item that's using that component. I can click on select all, and then I can pick the new one, pick this one, and then basically if I hit replace, every single assembly item that's using that indoor electrical wire will be replaced by the ground outdoor electrical wire. If I leave it blank, it will just remove it. It will take it away from the assembly. But by doing replace, it will just replace them. So I'll hit OK, hit close, go back to that assembly, and then we're going to notice that the item was completely changed, and the quantity, if it's the same unit of measure, will be swapped evenly. And now I have my new bill of materials cost, which happens to be different. At that point, I can check my margin. Again, it's telling me that my margin is 79.96. Go to edit markup, make sure that that's 80%, because again, that's part of my strategy to always make 80%. Hit OK, and then my new sales price is updated. Okay, all right, so that's a really important one. The other important piece here is, let me go ahead and show you one more thing here. I'm going to undo this build assembly, and keep in mind that this build assembly contains another assembly, right, which is that assembly right there. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this assembly, delete that build. Then I go back to my other build, and this is the build of the initial working process, and I'm going to delete this as well. So I'm going to show you one really, really cool feature that QuickBooks Enterprise has, which is, so right now I don't have any of my sub-assemblies, and I don't have any of my assemblies. When I go and build this assembly, so when I go build a chandelier, okay, you will notice here on the right that it says automatically build sub-assemblies. It says right here, automatically build required sub-assemblies. So if I put here that I wanted to build 40, QuickBooks tells me I can't, because at least one of these components I'm short in, which happens to be the box with light bulbs. I'm gonna hit cancel here for a second. If I click show shortage, it will tell me here clearly, look, what you're short in is this box with light bulbs. Okay, that's what I'm short in. I'm also short in electrical wire. Different story. Let me swap these again. Let me hit clear. I'm gonna go ahead and swap that component again, because I just outdoor electrical wire, where used, and then I'm gonna swap it back into with my electrical. Again, every single assembly item using that component will be swapped. Okay, didn't think of that during the example. And then I'm going to do the chandelier again. And again, I'm going to try to build 41. It tells me I can't. When I click show shortage, it tells me what I'm short in is my box with bulbs, right? So one real nice thing only available in QuickBooks Enterprise is to click here where it says automatically build required assemblies. You do automatically build required assemblies. I have to check that first, then put the 41. And then what QuickBooks is going to do is going to build two things at one time. In other words, it's going to build my sub-assembly and build this assembly all in one shot. So I'm going to go to build and close. So you see both assemblies were made, and the way you can tell is by going into my item list, and I'll maximize this, and I can go down to my box, go to quick report, and you see my assembly was actually made. Okay, this is when the assembly was made. That was made automatically with that little checkbox, and then obviously it was consumed on the next assembly. So that's especially on the areas of QuickBooks Enterprise where manufacturing it's really useful. All right, let me put the CPE keyword up. Put CPE keyword up, and then while the CPE keyword comes up, I'll try to see if I can answer any questions. There's like a million questions here. So there's the CPE keyword. If you need your CPEs, make sure you answer that correctly. And let me check the questions. Okay, somebody says, Hector, explain the replacing components again. I really didn't understand it. So basically what happens is you could have 20, 30 assembly items that all use one specific component. You know, let's say it's a type of wire, a type of cup, or a type of connector. And that item gets discontinued. You're no longer using it. And it gets replaced by a different type of connector or wire. Instead of going into each one to replace that component, you can use the where used category to replace them across all categories. Somebody says, is that only available in Enterprise? Yes, only available in Enterprise 2014 and up. Let's see. Somebody says, I'm trying to print the handout. Yeah, look in the chat box. The handout, the link is there. Let's see. Somebody says, I don't see the CPE keyword. Okay, there it is. There's a CPE keyword question. You have to answer the right answer. Somebody says, what about overhead component? Can you handle this? Yes. So just like I added labor, which was a service item or a other charge item, you can also add non-inventory parts in there. No problem. Let's say, would you recommend this in an auto mechanic shop? Probably not. I think most auto mechanic shops have their own software. This is more for 100% QuickBooks type of assemblies. Somebody says, oh, does the where used component change already build assemblies? No, where used is only for future. And again, only on Enterprise. Okay, perfect. Somebody says, I didn't know about the where used, that they should add that into the training materials. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay, let me go ahead and close the polling question. I'm still going through the question, see if, okay, how was your P&L affected on the wages? Yeah, great question. I guess that's the capstone of the exercise here. Let me go into the profit and loss and then see, I created a sub-account called allocated wages cost. I could have just picked the wages staff amount here, but I picked a different one. So you actually see expenses are going away from your bottom line. So you're taking away expenses from your net income and you're transferring them over to your inventory asset. So that's the answer to that question. That's exactly what happened. So that negative 302 is actually it's built into part of this finished good. So inside of this finished good somewhere, let me hit Control Y here. So inside of this finished good somewhere is the 302. You see it right there. I kind of did that too fast real quick. So I'm going to double click on finished good. I'm going to double click on the assembly, and then I'm going to hit Control Y, which is what lets me see the journal data, the accounting data inside of the assembly, and we're going to see here the 302.44. So that's where that 302.44 came. It was taken away from expenses and put as part of that assembly item right there. Let's see. Okay, let me see if I have any other questions. Let's see. There's a lot of questions. I don't know if I can answer them all. Um, Somebody says, should I use assemblies or groups? It depends. So if you want to use assemblies if you want to get rid of the inventory item and put it inside of another inventory item. Groups is something else. Actually, watch the first episode that we did where I actually talked about groups versus assemblies. I recommend that for the person that asked the question. There's a couple questions is that, yeah, you have to be careful about the average cost and the component cost because QuickBooks doesn't automatically add the average cost to the component cost. You're right. That's why I used that example. Let me see. Just trying to answer the questions that I could answer. How do you handle offsite vendor doing assembly? Oh, wow. Margot, that's a great question. Every case is different. That's when you send out the products to be assembled overseas or maybe in a different company or third party assembly. That would be something I have to study in depth. Maybe it'll be a good topic for another webinar. I will be doing a part 4 of manufacturing, but it will not be through QB Power Hour. It will be through enterprise.expert because I have a lot of feedback that these topics are a little bit advanced for the average QB Power Hour user that uses a lot of QuickBooks Pro and QBO as well. You can't do any of these things in there. So I will go into more in depth on enterprise topics, especially with manufacturing in the enterprise.expert webinars. Will you discuss adding labor? Okay, I did discuss that. Okay, I think I answered all the questions, or some of them, most of them. All right. Anyway, so next upcoming webinars, we're going to have on 2 weeks advanced tips in bank feeds. That's going to be an ACE course. So you're going to get continuing education if you're an advanced pro advisor. There will be a heavy focus on QuickBooks Online because there's a one particular feature in QuickBooks Online bank feeds that desktop doesn't have that pretty much trumps desktop or in any way when it comes to bank feeds. Then 2 weeks later will be tricky QBO conversions. Michelle will do that. She'll talk about payroll, inventory, sales tax, all the things that are a little bit muddy when it comes to converting from QBO to QuickBooks Desktop. Then 2 weeks later, Mark Wickersham from UK will talk about value pricing, new QBO engagements. It's actually an awesome webinar. You're not going to want to miss it. I mean, he devised a system to just get really, really good fees out of that. If you join us in enterprise.expert, which is on Wednesday, 2 weeks from now, Wednesday, we'll talk about QuickBooks Advanced Reporting. We'll focus on commission reports. Obviously, nothing related to this webinar, but if you're working in enterprise, you're going to love that one because commission reports are something that people request all the time. Anyway, LinkedIn, join Michelle's LinkedIn group. There's the link. Or join the QB Power Hour Facebook group to continue the conversation, ask the questions. You can email me if you have some questions. For the most part, I encourage technical questions to be emailed through the group because it allows other people than me to answer the questions. Anyway, thank you very much for joining. Please fill out the survey at the end of the webinar, send us some feedback, and see you or talk to you in a couple weeks.